The track I'm going to show you guys today is a track I did with Johnny, which I believe Logan has had on here before.
Yes.
Um, Me and Johnny have done a lot of collaborations in the past year, and so this is a kind of cinematic, sort of not bluesy, but kind of country rock cinematic type of vibe that we did for just to get pitched for trailer placements.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm gonna show you guys a little bit of this section that I'm gonna be kind of showing you I'm working with today. And then I'll kind of actually dive into the tracks and show you kind of what I have done. Because with these tracks, I didn't produce any of the instrumental track. Johnny did that, but when I've worked with Johnny, I pretty much will write all the lyrics, come up with the vocal melodies, and then I will record all the vocals and mix the vocals myself and then send them to him. So I figured this would be a good track to send you guys because it has a lot of like vocal stacks and stuff in it as well. So I'll show you guys this little section real quick. Okay, so let me back it up real quick. I think this way.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my ain't no prison that can keep me in. I'm an outlaw. You're gonna know my ain't no rival that compete with my sins. I'm an outlaw. You're gonna know my.
Okay, so that kind of repeats. So this is kind of what we're working with. So
Nice.
yeah, so kind of
Very,
the
very
big
Taylor cinematic.
yeah, the big kind of cinematic kind of country rockish vibe. Which I love doing songs in this vibe. I do a lot of stuff in kind of like the sync rockish kind of motivational um
Yeah.
uh arena, I guess. So anyways, I'm just going to kind of show you guys cuz obviously you can see I have a lot of vocals here, but I'm just going to show you guys what I do. So let's just start with the lead vocals. So, typically I'm sure Logan has kind of walked you through actually like recording vocals and stuff, making sure you have your gain set properly to where you're not like peaking, which you can usually tell you're doing that because you'll be in the red, like in the bar. Um, and your audio will kind of be hitting the outside
Mhm.
lines. So typically the first thing that I will do is I will actually go in here and kind of clean up the vocal first. So everything I do at the very front is like cleaning up the vocal, and then I do things dynamically to the vocal after that. So I'll just kind of show you guys what I do to clean it up a little bit. So I will listen to these phrases and I first will kind of like get rid of unnecessary spaces. So I'll just go in here.
You're gonna know my name.
So like typically I will, cut out some of these spaces.
My fame. 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 All your days. Days.
So I'll just work with this one little section
You're
right
gonna
here.
know my.
Okay. And then usually once I kind of cut out those spaces, I will usually do I usually will do just like a little fade on the end of these guys. Um just so we're not getting any like clipping, at the beginning or the ends of these.
You're just going to the fade tool there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So sorry, I'm using some like shortcuts, but in Logic here, you have all these tools in here. So you could go into the fade tool here. But what I'm clicking is I'm actually clicking the letters T and A. um, which will, hang on, sorry. Oh, yeah, there we go. Which will automatically switch to the fade tool. So that's just like a logic shortcut if any of you want to know it. You just hit TA, that'll go straight to the fade tool, which just makes it faster. And then if you hit TT, it goes back to your pointer tool. Um, so
Nice.
those are a couple of shortcuts. Also for like zooming in, what I'm doing there is I'm just hitting command with the arrows on my keyboard. So yeah, so you can like, you know, zoom in this way, zoom out. So those are just like a few little shortcuts I typically will use. Also, when I'm cutting things like I was earlier, I am hitting Command T for that. So I'll just Command T on this guy. That's going to clip it.
Mhm.
Um, Command Z will undo that. So yeah, those are a lot of shortcuts I use all the time when I'm doing this type of stuff just to be a little quicker with it. Um, so yeah, I typically, get rid of unnecessary spaces, fade those out so you're not clipping. And then I will actually just walk you guys through what I have on my channel strip over here. Um, so everything I'm going to show you guys on here is what I use to clean up the vocal first. So the first thing I actually use on here is this plugin called Vocal Writer, which is pretty cool. It's a Waves plugin, and this plugin actually automatically gain stages the audio as it's
Mhm.
playing, so you don't have to like go in and
Yeah.
manually adjust the make things louder or quieter,
Hmm.
it just saves a ton of time. So I typically you'll be able to see when I play this knob right here is going to go up and down when I play
You're
this
gonna
audio.
know my name.
So it's like automatically adjusting the gain of, the parts that are too loud or too quiet. It's if they're too quiet, it's pulling it up a little bit. If it's too loud, it's pulling it down a little bit. So I really like that plugin just because it saves me a lot of time, and kind of
Hmm.
automatically does that for me. Um, the next two plugins that I use are kind of also for just getting rid of like unnecessary background noise and cleaning up the vocal. So the first one that I like is called Clarity. I believe this is also, yeah, a Waves
Oh yeah, it's a
plugin.
great one.
Yeah, I love Waves plugins, so I use
Everyone
a lot.
has the bundle, so they have all
Yeah.
this
Okay,
good stuff,
perfect.
all the
Perfect.
magic.
Perfect. So this one is great, if I just completely take this to 0 and play it.
You're gonna know my name.
And then I'll just adjust it as I play it actually.
You're gonna know my name. My
Makes it
fame.
sound very
All your
way more
So
isolated.
it's not like a huge difference, but you can tell a little bit that it's kind of like uh just making it's like, yeah, like you said, Logan, isolating it a little bit, making it the background noise go away a little bit more. So I will typically just adjust this to what sounds like good to my ear. For this guy, I had it on about 30.
Hmm.
So
You're gonna know my
because I don't want it to sound like it's like too much, to where it's taking away from the quality of the vocal.
Yeah.
But I just want it on there a little bit so it's helping a little bit. Same thing with this. This is a stock plugin with Logic. It's called Noise Gate. This kind of does a similar thing. And with this one, I don't really mess with a ton of this stuff. I usually will just mess with like the threshold on it. And depending on what song I'm working with, it's like I might have more of this noise gate being used or less. I typically will just adjust this to where it sounds natural, in the same way. So, like, you'll hear the difference if I really crank this guy. It's going to start like cutting off words.
You're gonna know my
So
name.
you can tell because it's like cutting off the words. So I typically will adjust this to where it sounds natural and it's not doing that. I usually keep this guy probably within like 40 to 50. Honestly, on this one, I had it on 50.
Hmm.
Um,
You're gonna know my name.
Might lower it just a little bit.
You're gonna know my name.
Yeah, it just like cleans it up a little bit too, you know? So, I usually do those things first, kind of like gain stage, noise gate it, and then I do surgical EQ. So with EQ, you have surgical EQ, which is to like clean up the vocal, and then you or take things away from the vocal. And then you have dynamic EQ, which is like you're adding things or boosting things in the EQ. So with surgical EQ, typically I always will cut out like below about 100. And I'm using FabFilter Pro Q3. This is kind of like the plugin I use for all of my EQ stuff, which is like a very common plugin producers and mixers use. So yeah, you can see with this one, I kind of have just cut out below 100, which, you know, with your EQ, you have like your lows, your mids, and your highs with these. And so with these guys, I'll just kind of show you with one of these. I'll pull this guy up. So typically what I will do next is after I cut out below 100 is I will take one of these guys, kind of raise it up pretty high, and I'll actually sweep this as I'm playing the vocal just to see if I can hear like any like unnecessary frequencies or like nasty frequencies that just sound real bad. And then I will cut those out. So I'll just play through the vocal so you can hear it.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days.
Yeah, okay, like this one right here.
You're gonna know my.
Like it almost, I don't know if guys can even hear it, but it almost sounds like something's like pinging
Yeah.
off of, you know what I mean? So, yeah, typically what I'm doing with that is I'm using this little guy, and then I'm
Bell.
just, yeah, the bell, and then I'm just making it like skinnier, you know, by adjusting these knobs. And then I typically will cut it out kind of down to like -3 on that one. So I'm not like completely getting rid of it, but I'm getting rid of it enough to where it's like cutting out of the vocal, you know? So that's why I have these three here, is because I swept the vocal like a few times just to try to hear some frequencies, and these were the three that I heard that I was like, oh, those don't sound great, you know?
Mhm.
And so then I just kind of cut them out of the vocal. So yeah, that's typically what I will do when I'm doing just like a surgical EQ on a vocal. And then I typically will only have maybe like a few of those in there, you know?
Mhm.
So
Probably no
yeah,
more than like 3 or 4.
yeah. You don't you don't want to have, I know when I was first learning to do this stuff, I was like cutting out all these things, and then I was just
Me
like,
too.
okay, this is not I'm just like
Yeah.
cutting out the vocal at this point, you know. So yeah, typically now I will only have like a few of those in there.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I'll do next. And then the last thing I kind of do on here is what's called a de-esser. And basically that's just kind of helping to get rid of some of your S sounds, you know, making them not as harsh in your vocal. So I actually use this de-esser plugin.
I think it's from Slate, right?
Yeah. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't remember which one this one is from. Um, and so, anyways, with this one, I typically will just adjust, I mainly will just adjust the sensitivity and the amount knobs to what I want. And
Mhm.
like I said, it's just dependent on the song. I do a lot of different types of songs, so it's just dependent on what the vocal is like.
You're gonna know my name,
But
my
you can
fame,
kind of tell,
all
like,
your
if I really crank
days.
these, you know,
You're gonna
it
know.
starts to sound unnatural because I'm like fully taking out, you know what I mean? Doing it
Mhm.
too much. So I typically will kind of scale it back.
You're
Um,
gonna know my
A lot of times I will usually have it kind of in the 65 range.
Hmm.
Like I said, it is dependent on the song, but for this song, I had it kind of in the 65-ish range. So I'm just gonna like keep it there. Um, yeah, so that's kind of everything that I will do to kind of like clean up a vocal up front. Is there anything that you guys feel like you have questions about that off the top of your head?
Do you print do you print those effects onto that vocal, or what do you do
Yeah, so
after
I
that?
typically do print it mainly because I believe either one of these plugins tends to take up a lot of CPU.
Yeah.
Which
Clarity does a
obvious
lot.
Yes, clarity is like the worst. I figured that out because I was having some problems. So I typically will print it now, just so that I don't, when I'm working with multiple vocals, I don't have like a bunch of vocal tracks with clarity on it.
Mm.
Because then it prevents me from being able to work on the track because of the CPU stuff. So I typically will print it. Um, so then I will just show you guys kind of what I do next because this is going to be like my like after I print it
Do you want to
basically.
show us how you print it really quick? Just
Yeah,
walk
yeah,
us through
yeah.
that.
So I basically I actually just will like highlight the whole track or whatever and then I just
Hmm.
right click on it and I just do a bounce in place like this. And then I'll just call this let's just call this like clean vocal.
Hmm.
And then it should just print this section.
Nice. Okay. A couple people on here are in Pro Tools. So in Pro
Okay.
Tools, what you do is you just right click on the last plugin in the chain, which would be, I guess, the de-esser. Then
Okay.
you'd select commit up to this insert. So then it would
Oh,
print
okay.
all of those just for Robin and Angela. But
Okay.
yeah, similar process to
Gotcha.
it.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
Yeah,
carry
it's
on.
pretty easy in Logic because you just can just right click and bounce it in place. So
Yeah,
that's typically what I'll do. I'm just gonna get rid of that for a second,
awesome.
and then we'll move to this track right here. So this is basically after I had printed that track. So working with the cleaned up vocal, and now I'm like adding stuff dynamically to it to make the vocal dynamic. So I'll just kind of walk you guys through. I'll take all of this off and go one by one. So, first thing I will typically put on here is auto tune. I use Antares for auto tune. So, this is another very common plugin for auto tune. Antares is great because you have a retune speed and then you have humanize. So,
Mhm.
you can adjust it. I typically will adjust it to where there's some auto tune on there, but my voice still sounds natural and stuff. It's not going to sound
Mhm.
like robotic. But I'll just mess around with these so you can hear. Because let's just say I take this humanize down and I turn this retune speed up. You're gonna notice for sure.
You're gonna know my name.
Get
Nice. Let's
that
go.
that T-Pain vibe in there.
Yeah, just leave it like that. I'm
Um,
just kidding.
so yeah, I will usually turn this guy down.
You're gonna know.
And I'll turn the humanize up. I think I had both of these at like 80, but I usually will turn the humanize up.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days.
So I will like typically just adjust those to where to me it sounds like natural and not super robotic or crazy,
Yeah.
to where it fits the vibe of the song. Antares is really cool too because there's like all sorts of different effects you can do. I've actually used some of these for different songs depending on what it was. My first my first placement that I got actually on Riot Games was which a song with a song I did called Smooth Criminal that I like wrote, produced,
Mm.
mixed myself. And it's like a bluesy song, but then it has a really cinematic chorus. And for some reason when I was like producing and mixing it, I was like, I feel like I need to just throw a lot of auto tune onto my voice for this song, and I had never done that before. But
Mm,
I just used Antares to do that, and it like fit the vibe of the song so well, and it was cool because that's the
nice.
first song I like got a placement with, you know.
Let's go. It's
But
awesome.
yeah, so it's really cool because there's just a bunch of different like vocode stuff, like all sorts of stuff in Antares that you can use. So that's what I will typically use. Oh, you also want to make sure you set your stuff up here correctly as well, because if you don't, it's gonna sound super wonky. So you want to make sure you have it like in the key of the song. I depending on what register I'm singing in, I usually will have it in soprano.
Mm,
But yeah, so you just want to make sure you have that stuff set correctly up there, and then you can adjust this stuff. So that's what I will use for auto tune. And then basically what I do after this is I just add like a couple of light compressors onto the channel strip. Um so let me see. I believe these are both just stock Logic compressors, and I think they're both actually like pretty identical. Yeah, they're just light
mhm.
compressors. So I'm gonna be honest with you guys when it comes into the like what all of these specifically do. I most of the time when it comes to mixing stuff, I typically am just adjusting things until it sounds right with my ear, you know, which is a lot of what mixing does. Logan would probably be better at explaining like this is what a ratio is, or this is what a, you know, what the release is or whatever, you know. But I typically will kind of just adjust the threshold and like the makeup gain and stuff just to where it's not compressing super hard, which you can tell the difference because it'll start to sound pretty like harsh, you know, if it's like a lot of compression. Um, so yeah, have the distortion off. So yeah, I will kind of just do a couple of like light compressors on here. Is there anything that you want to add, Logan, with like compression?
Um, well, I give everyone a template, and
Okay.
in the template, it's kind of similar. They have a fast or aggressive compressor first, and then like a
Yeah.
softer, more rounded compressor after it, which is
Yeah.
usually like the I'm sure you've used like the R box before, and
Yeah.
then they'll have the LA2A after that. And
Okay.
the one you
Yeah.
have up there now is kind of like the it's like the Logic version of the LA2A,
Yeah.
like their stock version of it. So yeah, really
Yeah,
really
which
similar to what you're doing.
I do have both of those plugins as well, and I'll show you guys that on another track here in a minute.
Oh,
Because
cool.
I do use those for something different.
Yeah.
But for just like the lead vocal, I typically will just have a couple of light compressors on there, and then
Mhm.
I will actually add. So this is a stock plugin with Logic as well. It's a tube like EQ plugin. So if I go into
That's like one of the best stock Logic
the
plugins, in my opinion.
yeah,
Sounds so good.
if you go into the EQ, you know, and then you go to like the vintage EQ, it's the vintage tube EQ. So this one I will just kind of add as like a little bit of a dynamic EQ just because I think it has a little bit more of like a warmth to it, I feel
Hmm.
like, you know. Um, so I typically will just add this one on after the compressors. Um, like I said, I don't do a ton of adjusting with all of this stuff. I sometimes I'll just go back and forth between some of these things, see what it sounds like to my ear. Um, but I don't mess with a ton of these guys just because just throwing this on there kind of as it is sounds good to me, so I typically will kind of just leave it like that. um and then these two I use all the time on vocals, so these are both with Slate, I believe.
Hmm.
This is the oh gosh, I'm so sorry, for some reason it's been doing this. It's gonna look real crazy, but it's
Oh,
fine because
whoa. It's trippy.
I know it's like tripping out. But I only use this one. So
Okay. The revival.
Slate has, if you guys use Slate, there's like, you know, you can sign up for kind of like a monthly membership type of thing and you get access to like a lot of their plugins. So I really love this Revival plugin through Slate, which is under the virtual mix rack for Slate. And this is really great. I typically just adjust the shimmer because it adds like a really cool crispness to the lead vocal. So I'll just show you guys real quick. Um, you'll hear the
You're
difference here.
gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna
Like when
know
I take it off,
my,
you can hear how it gets like a lot warmer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days.
So it brings up like it adds to some of the highs in the vocal that give it a little bit more of like a crisp, polished type of vibe. So I think I had this one kind of sitting around 16.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're
So
gonna
you
know
can kind of hear
my,
it
you're gonna
like without
know
it
my name, my
and
fame,
then with it.
all your
Mm-hmm.
days.
Yeah, you
Nice.
can kind of notice the difference. So I love this plugin for just adding like some, some of that crispness
Some
like to the
revival.
vocal. Yeah. Um, and then Fresh Air as well, which I think is also through Slates.
That one's free too. I definitely recommend all of you guys to download that
Yeah.
one. You can just go to the Slate Audio website
Yes.
and yeah, it's completely free.
This one
It's a
is
good one.
amazing too because you can like just adjust these two, the mid and the highs, and it kind of does the
Mhm.
same thing. So,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll use both of these. Sometimes I'll just use Fresh Air. Sometimes I'll just use the Revival. But you can kind of hear
You're gonna know my name, my fame,
this is
all
without it.
your days.
This is with
You're
it.
gonna know my, you're gonna know my
Without it.
name, my
With it.
fame, all
So
your,
you can kind of hear that it just kind of adds to it. So I will, like I said, I'll adjust these just because you can start to hear it can get too much if you
you're
go
gonna know my name, my
like
fame.
the higher you go with it, it can start to sound sharp. So
Hmm.
I will kind of just adjust these depending on the song to where it's not sounding like too high frequency or too sharp.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, and then for this song specifically, this is obviously more of kind of like a big cinematic motivational like country rock type of vibe. So I put distortion on it on the vocal just to give it some of that like grunge vibe,
Hmm.
which this one I just used the distortion stock distortion in Logic. So if you just go in here and you go down to distortion and you just click it on there. And then I just adjust the drive and the tone. I'll play this for you guys with it on here.
You're gonna know my name.
So if I adjust this guy down, it's gonna get like warmer.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my,
Yeah, so you can hear how that just adds some like distortion to it to make it like a little grittier, to fit the vibe of the song. And then obviously you can adjust this drive as well.
you're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my,
So yeah, that's kind of everything I have on the vocal. And then after that is kind of when I will add like some reverb and some a little bit of delay.
Hmm.
So I usually will add reverb and delay through a bus because I typically will use the same reverb bus on like multiple tracks. And it's just easier when I have this many vocal tracks to be able to just use the same bus for all of it, So, the reverb that I use, which is also very commonly used, is this Valhalla vintage verb. Um, I typically will just adjust the mix to like 65, the decay down a little bit to like 3, and then I kind of take this pre-delay off. And then on the actual mixing knob down here, I will kind of adjust this to what sounds best for the song. So I'll just play.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my.
So yeah, you can hear that verb on there now. I'm just gonna play it with the track real quick.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my. You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my.
Okay, and then I'll show you guys the I have another bus. So also, sorry, in Logic, when you're adding a bus, you're gonna come down here and then basically go to bus, and you have all these open buses. So you pretty much just pick one that's free, and then you can add. So like, for example, I'll just show you guys, I'll just pick a random one like 5. So it's empty. So typically what I will do is I'll just go in here to my audio units, go down to like Valhalla, click that guy, and then like I said, I'll kind of just like adjust this to what I want it to be at. Yeah, and then I can just adjust it on the actual knob. Um, so I'll put this back to the first one that I had it on. And then, so anyways, I did the same thing with this with delay. I just go to like a free bus, and then I just add Echo Boy onto it, which is what I use for delay, which is this
Mm-hmm.
plugin. This one is a what's it called?
It's from Sound Toys,
Yes,
right?
sound toys. That's right.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So, typically on a lead vocal, I will set this to like an 1/8 delay, and then I will add just a little bit of feedback, like a quarter of feedback. I'll kind of have the mix turned up to where it's a quarter back from the wet, and then kind of keep the echo time in the middle. And then I just will adjust how much of it I want, on the actual volume knob over here. So I'll just kind of show you guys.
How do you know what note divisions to do, like 8th notes or
Yeah.
16th notes or?
So I typically use 1/8 notes for honestly, I do a lot of that by ear, but typically for the lead
Mhm.
vocal, I use 1/8 notes because it's a very short delay. So like if I were to use, here, I'll just switch it. If I were to use let's just put it on like a 4th note, you're gonna probably hear it immediately.
You're gonna know my name.
That's actually not crazy. But I typically will use the 1/8 note just because
Mhm.
it's shorter. So when it comes to
Yeah.
the lead vocal, you want some delay on there, but it's almost like you want it to be more felt rather than like
Mhm.
heard, because it just adds some like space to the vocal. So
Yeah.
you don't really want it to be like totally heard, it's more of like a felt thing.
Mhm.
So that's why I'll typically will choose an 1/8 note for that one just because it's shorter, so you're not like totally going to
Mhm.
hear it, versus if you were going to choose like a quarter note or a half note,
Yeah.
you're definitely going to hear it more dramatically. And then, yeah, like I said, I'll kind of have the feedback because the more I turn up this feedback, like the more I'm just gonna crank it.
You're gonna know my
it just like becomes like too much, you know? So I usually will kind of just have a little bit of feedback and stuff on there so that it's there and that you feel it, but it's not like um it's not super in your face, you know? Um so sorry, I just realized
Gotcha.
I was adjusting that on the wrong thing. So
Oh,
I was
all good.
like, yeah, that wasn't extremely noticeable. I think I was doing that on the wrong thing. Hang on.
You're good.
Let me let me crank it on this one now. Sorry, guys.
You're gonna know my name,
Yeah, there we
There it
go.
is.
my
There we go. I was like, why am I not hearing it? My bad. Sorry, guys. Um, so yeah, anyways, now let me change this to a quarter note or a yeah, because you're for sure gonna hear the difference now.
You're gonna know my name, my fame. All you
It's almost like a full echo, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's why I typically will keep it on a quarter and then I just adjust it to where it's like there,
you're gonna know my name.
but it's not like crazy, you know?
Hmm.
Which this guy I actually will probably turn it down just a little bit more.
You're gonna know my name.
Yeah, so it's like it's giving it space, but it's not like, you know,
Yeah.
super crazy. So that is typically what I will do with like a lead vocal. And then to make the lead vocal a little more upfront in the track, you know, I'm going to show you. I typically will actually copy the lead vocal and paste it to like a new track. And then which is basically, I'm just like doubling the vocal. And then for this one, I basically have the same exact settings, but I have this one like literally just panned outwards. And I use this doubler. I really like this doubler plugin. This is with Waves as well. And I'm going to show you guys without this one so you can hear.
You're gonna know my name.
So I don't know if you guys can tell, but like it's now this one is literally like out wide.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
if I were to click this direct right here, you'll hear it come up the middle.
You're gonna know
Right. You can
my name.
So
decide
it's like
where,
all
yeah.
three, you know? So you can decide I could like take one of these off.
You're gonna know.
Yeah, so it's in my left. So I will typically take the direct off and I'll have
Hmm.
it coming up just out to the sides, you know?
Hmm.
And then I usually will turn this guy down to about like 15 or 16, negative 16, sorry, decibels. And so this is another thing where it's not necessarily heard, but it's like felt and it kind of
Hmm.
thickens like the vocal up a little bit. So
You're gonna know my name, my
this is
fame.
without it.
All your days.
And then this is with it.
You're gonna know my name, my
That's
fame.
smart. Yeah.
All your days.
Like you can almost hear how the vocal is like a little bit thinner without it.
Yeah. It
You're
works
gonna
because, yeah,
know.
you're widening it. Normally, I would tell people
Yeah.
not to like copy paste for vocal doubles, but you're able
Yeah.
to in this instance because
Yeah.
you're widening the second one. Otherwise, if the doubler wasn't on there, then you'd probably hear phasing, like it would just be like
Yeah.
louder, but you're cutting out the middle and just widening it. So that's a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool trick.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and yeah, I usually have it turned down to where it's more felt because like obviously if I turn this guy up, you're gonna
You're gonna know my name.
that's where you're starting to get that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, where it's like clashing with it and interfering. And then this is another trick that I will show you guys. So this is going to be kind of like parallel compression I do, I guess. This is typically what I will do. So this is kind of what Logan was talking earlier about with the other compressor tools. For this one, I literally just have auto tune on it, and then I use RVox on here, which is with waves. I usually have it set to this in Yo Face vocal. So on this parallel compression one, basically what I'm doing is I'm putting like a couple of like hard compressors on it to make it kind of like intense. And then I just have the same EQ to vintage tube EQ on there. And with this one, I'll just let you guys hear this one by itself. This one I have turned way down. Well, I'll turn it up. Oh, sorry. This is what I'm talking about. So you have to make sure this guy's set right or it's gonna sound crazy. I think it was, what was it?
Oh, G sharp.
Minor. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, let me fix this. Anyways, so this one I typically will do just to also like the other one I just showed you, it kind of widens the lead vocal, and then this one kind of like thickens the lead vocal a little bit. So this one I have turned down way low. But I'll turn it up. Just so you can hear it's like a little more harshly compressed. But this one I will typically turn down pretty low to like negative 36 decibels. And then I'll just play it to where you can hear all three together.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days.
I'm going to take that one off just so you can hear it.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days.
And then I'm going to put it back on.
You're gonna know my name, my fame.
So I don't know if you can really tell the difference, but it's almost like it just like thickens it like slightly, you know, which helps like the vocal to be like a little more upfront in the track. So I'll just play it with the track real quick.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days.
This is without both of
You're
these.
gonna know my name.
So it almost like brings it to the forefront just like a little bit more, you know? So that's typically what I will do with like a lead vocal. And then the rest of these vocals, which I'll show you guys, are kind of like the vocal stacks that I did for this song, which you can kind of see what I have labeled over here. So for this type of a song, obviously it's going to sound bigger if you have more stacked vocals. And for this one, I did some different things. Like for the melody, I did some like breathy versions of it to kind of give it a little bit of an oomph, you know? So, you know, these, I have like a couple of breathy melodies. I have a couple of low breathy harmonies, and then just a regular low harmony. And then low melody, low breathy melody, high harmony. So I'll typically kind of do a few of each with this type of a song just to give it like an epic, big vocal type of feel. So I'll just like play it all together so you guys can hear it.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my.
Yeah, so that's like all of them together. So these basically have pretty much the same settings as the lead vocal on them, except yeah, those are actually the same. Those are the same. Except I just also kind of used the doubler on these ones, and then I think I probably just put a little bit more reverb on these ones. So I didn't do a whole lot different to these. Pretty much the same, just adjusted like sometimes I'll just adjust the reverb a little more, or I'll adjust like the fresh air or the revival a little bit more, just depending on what I'm wanting those stacks to sound like, if I feel like, oh, they need a little more high frequency or they need a little more reverb to make it sound just a little bigger or something.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I'll just solo, like, let's just solo this one.
You're gonna know my name.
So like with these ones, I was kind of doing like a just breathy sort of, not fully yelling, but just like a breathy kind of melody with some oomph to it, just and was stacking those to give it a little bit more of that vibe. So I did that like with the melody, with the rest of the harmonies as well. And I also would do like a regular, make sure these are, yeah.
You're gonna know my name.
So that's like a regular one. But
Mhm.
then I did like
You're gonna know my name.
giving it a little bit of a different vibe and stacking them just so it kind of makes it all feel a little bit more full when they're like all together.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I do with those. There's not too much of a difference there. But I can like solo these just so you guys can hear them without the track.
You're gonna know my name, my fame, all your days. You're gonna know my.
But yeah, you can kind of hear how mixing it up a little bit like that, it kind of gives it more of like a fuller, like bigger feel vocally. So typically when I've done like trailers with Johnny, trailer tracks will have big sections like these, and I'll do it in a similar way, where I'm kind of recording um usually like 4 to 5 different types of harmony parts or whatever, and then I'm doing a couple like variations of those harmonies and just stacking them just to make it feel bigger and like more full. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's mainly what I've got. I don't know if you want to add to any of that, Logan, or if you have like any specific questions.
Um, no, that's super good. And maybe just how do you arrange your vocals differently in like a verse versus a chorus, I guess,
Okay, yeah. um
just with like all the
pretty
stacks.
yeah, pretty similar. Let me just go
I know this changes
back
by
here.
genre quite a bit, but
Oh, for sure. So here's my lead vocal for this one, I think.
I'm an outlaw, making my own rules. Wanted in a wasteland, pitied as a fool.
So like in these tracks, these types of songs, like these trailer songs, typically I don't really have stacks going on in the verses.
hmm
Because trailer tracks are very specific. It's kind of
hmm
like you have some little instrumental sections and then you'll have kind of like a drop down kind of verse section. So with that, I literally just have like lead vocal with the double in the parallel, like I showed you guys earlier.
yeah.
And then I think this section is pretty
I'm an
similar. Yeah,
outlaw.
this section is pretty much the same. And then I started adding stacks in here.
Ain't no prison that can keep me in. I'm a rebel on a different level. Ain't no rival to compete with my sins. You're gonna know my name.
So pretty much the rest of this song has stacks in it once that section starts, because it just gets bigger and
hmm
bigger. The rest of the track, which is typically how these trailer tracks kind of go. But if I were doing a different, like let's say I was doing a different type of song that's more for like my artistry, I'd have probably a typical like verse, pre-chorus, chorus, second verse, pre-chorus, chorus. type of vibe going on. And usually what I will do is I will in the first verse, I typically will just have, lead vocal. And then once I get to the pre-chorus, depending on the song, I might add some like a harmony or two in there to kind of just add to the pre-chorus. And then when I get to the chorus, I usually will have like a lot of vocal stacks to make it big, fill it out. And then when I get to the second verse, I typically will have like a harmony on the second verse, to kind of distinguish
Mhm.
it from the first verse.
Yeah.
And then getting into like the second pre-chorus, chorus, the longer the song goes on, I'm kind of adding more stacks to it. So that would be typical for like a song that I'm doing in kind of like the stomp clap rock type of genre,
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like I do use that method for the majority of the songs I'm doing. If it's following kind of like a verse, pre-chorus, chorus, second verse, pre-chorus, chorus type of structure, as
Mhm.
I'm kind of thinking like, oh, let me keep the first verse like minimal, maybe add something into the second pre-chorus a little bit, and then fill out the chorus, and then second verse maybe add a harmony to make it different than the first verse,
Yeah.
and then kind of stack things from there as the song
Hmm.
goes on to make it dynamically bigger towards the end of the song. And
Yeah.
I usually will use kind of a similar method when I'm doing like a harmony or something as far as what I'm using on the vocal chain for the harmony, in the verse. So,
I saw your vocal stacks, and the only thing that went through my mind was, oh my goodness, how many hours did that take to time align all those vocals? That's what that's what went through my
okay.
mind. And like
Yeah.
how did you do that so it maybe didn't take hours, or are there little tricks to do it?
Yeah, so usually when I'm mixing vocals, I like, if I was mixing vocals for this song, I typically will just take a day where I'm like, my focus today is just to like mix these vocals. I will say like usually I can, if I already have everything recorded, and I'm just focusing on mixing the vocals, usually I can do this stuff within like a couple of hours, get it fully mixed. Because I typically will go through and kind of do the same types of thing. And a lot of this stuff I can do quickly. Like, for example, if I'm going through this section, whenever I was cutting the spaces out of vocals. Like if I was doing that for I usually will do what I showed you with the lead vocal. I'll do the lead vocal by itself, and then once I start stacking harmonies, first of all, I try my absolute best to make sure I'm like singing right with
Mm.
the same like intonation, the same, so that I can do less work, you know.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of using the same intonation and everything when I'm tracking the vocals. But then I can literally go in here, solo these with the track or whatever or not, and just
Ain't no prison that can keep me in.
like I would like cut there, like I can do all these tracks all at once as far as like cutting, um,
Yeah. As a
fading th
group,
fading things in and out.
basically.
I can do it as a group, and then um I don't typically, another thing too I didn't show you guys is like in Logic, you double click this track, you go into this guy, you turn on this button, you can do flex pitch, different things, whatever. So this is where you can come in, you can actually kind of manually pitch correct things, in Logic. Um a lot of times with harmonies, I'm not going through and spending tons of time like let me pitch correct every single freaking
Yeah.
note on the you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like especially with harmonies, because like with these types of a song, it's almost over time I've kind of learned it's almost actually not really bad if one of these vocals sounds slightly off pitch, because it actually just adds to like the sort of choir feel of it, you know what I mean? Where everything's not just like perfectly,
Mhm.
So I'm not with these harmonies, I'm not really going through and like, let me pitch correct everything like absolutely perfectly. If I solo the vocal and I'm like, oh, that's real off, then I'll go in there and fix like a couple pitches or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, So I will kind of do that where I'll solo each one and I'll just listen to it. And if there's like a note or something that's really off to me, I'll fix it. But you know, for these guys, I'm mainly kind of relying on the auto tune and then
Yeah.
kind of letting them be a little more natural, just and not perfect because it does add to the like epic choir vibe of it. If they were all just like perfectly pitched, it just would sound I don't think it would sound
Yeah.
as good to be honest, you know.
Mhm.
Um so yeah, that's something I've kind of learned over time though. So um yeah,
Yeah.
but typically I don't actually typically go in and like manually align these right perfectly on time, you know. I try to just really make sure I like sing them on time up front, you know.
Mhm.
And then I having your vocal presets helps too, you know, because then I can just throw the vocal preset onto all of these tracks and then I can just
Mhm.
solo each listen to them, fix any little pitches I'm hearing that are really off, and kind of do everything all at once, you know. So it doesn't take as long as you think it would
Okay.
once you get into
Mhm.
the habit of it, you know. The lead
Cool.
vocal takes the longest, honestly,
Mhm.
because that's the one that matters. That's the one that matters the most that I'm like trying to make sure is really cleaned up and like sounds really great with the track and is sounding really good pitch wise, you know.
Mhm.
So that's the one that takes the longest for sure.
I'll go over how we prioritize like pitch correction through tuning, like hand tuning versus auto tune, because
Yep.
that is a fine balance that you have to
Yeah.
figure out when you're producing. And like Kayla said, you'll spend most of your time tuning and editing on the main vocal. Hand tune your main vocal, just get it like perfectly in pitch, like Kayla said. And then you'll lean more on auto tune for your background vocals. So like
Yep.
you'll let auto tune do the heavy lifting for the background tracks because it could be 10 or 20, you know,
Yep.
like Kayla
Yep.
has a lot there.
Exactly.
And that'll
Yeah.
also like save you time.
Like when I first started and stuff, especially with songs like this, I always thought like, oh, I gotta go through like every single vocal and make
Yeah.
sure every one of them is like just as perfect as the lead, and it just would take forever. And then
Yeah.
over time, I just realized like, oh, it actually sounds better to not do some of these perfectly because it makes it sound like a more full natural choir because you're not doing the same exact especially when it's your own voice, like all of these stacks are my own voice, it's not like a choir people, you know, so it like it just helps it to sound more full and like the imperfectness of it makes it sound better because like I said, since it's all my voice, if I were to like make these all perfect, it would probably sound more robotic and not as, you know.
Yeah, there's so many things to go over because all the mixing things we talk about, it can kind of shift depending on what genre you're in. So
Yeah,
the
it's
mixing
very
world is
true.
just, gosh, it's so deep.
It's almost like annoying because like, you know, I talk to so many other friends or whatever who do this stuff and it's really funny too, because I was listening to a podcast by these guys who are like pros and they've worked with huge artists and huge producers and all sorts of stuff, you know, very well-known people. And even them on the podcast, they were joking around about this and they were like, yeah, so like, you know, like, do you ever feel like your mixes suck, you know? And the other guy's like, all the time, you know? And it's just like, when I heard that, I was like, wow, okay. So like literally
It's
everyone feels this
encouraging.
way, you know? It's just like, you're like even people who are like the pros of the pros, they all feel this way and it is encouraging because it just mixing is for me it was the hardest thing to figure out because you know there's not really a formula to it. Like yes, there are
Mhm.
certain things where it's like you got to use like your EQ, your compressors, your you know, but it really is so dependent on the genre of the song and anyone who's a pro will kind of tell you like you got to go with your gut or like your ear, you know, and you're just like
Mhm.
all right, you know. So but I do feel like there is something that happens, maybe Logan can agree with this. I don't know. I know for me there is something that happens where the more you mix songs, it's almost like your ears something clicks and your ears do become
Yeah.
attuned to it. I know
Mhm.
people told me that when I was learning to mix and I was just like frustrated, but then it actually did happen for me, where I was all of
Mhm.
a sudden it felt like my ears were just like
Yeah.
attuned to it, where I would notice like, oh, that's too sharp, or that's too much reverb, or that's too whatever, and the more you do it, the more your ears become attuned to it, and the more it does kind of just become like second nature, because you start to really hear what sounds the best.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, hopefully that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Even like I know for me it helps sometimes to, if I've spent like some hours mixing a song, it will help for
Yeah.
me to like step away from it and then
Mhm.
come back the next day, because then like coming
Yeah.
back with fresh ears, hearing it and being like, oh, this is a little too much like this or whatever, let me adjust these things, like stepping away from it is a good thing, and it can help, coming back with fresh ears and making adjustments and stuff, and also having someone else that is great, or like that you trust, like listen to your mix, like I know for sure I could like send a track like this or something to Logan and be like, hey, can you tell me how this mix sounds, and
Mhm.
sending it to someone else whose ear is really attuned to it, where they can be like, they know the language and they can be like, oh, you might want to adjust this, or there, it feels like there's too much of this, that can also be really helpful as well when it comes to mixing.